There are stories you can't simply read. You have to step into their depths. This is one of those. It's not just about a man, but about a journey that challenges reality itself. If you stay, you might never see the world the same way again. Carlos Castaneda didn't just want to understand the world. He wanted to go beyond it. What he discovered can't be found in books, but in a glance, in a silence, in a single gesture that changes everything. This isn't a story to listen to, it's a threshold to cross. This is the story of a man who crossed the boundaries of human perception, an anthropologist, a writer, but above all, a seeker. Carlos Castaneda wrote about invisible worlds, multiple realities, sorcerers and sacred plants. But who was he really, and how much truth lies within his stories? Carlos Castaneda was born in Peru, probably in 1925, but from the very beginning, his life is wrapped in mystery. He himself contributed to fueling this fog. He changed his birth date several times, gave different places of origin, altered or omitted details about his childhood, his family, even his real name. Over time, he would claim to have been born in Brazil, or in a different year. Sometimes he would say nothing at all, as if, from the start, he had been working to erase his personal past. In the 1950s, he moved to the United States and settled in California. There, he enrolled at UCLA, the University of California, Los Angeles, to study anthropology. He immersed himself in scientific thought with the mindset of a man in search of answers, but something within him always remained other, always elsewhere. In 1962, he earned his Bachelor of Arts degree. In 1973, after years of research and publishing success, he obtained his PhD in anthropology, also at UCLA. But his academic career would never be normal, because Castaneda had no interest in becoming a professor. He was drawn to something that escaped libraries and ethnographic methods, and soon that attraction would lead him into the heart of the desert, toward an encounter that would change his life forever. In the harsh and unforgiving heart of the Mexican desert, where the horizon seems to tremble under the weight of the sun and the stones guard ancient silences, a young man wanders with a worn-out notebook in his pocket and an analog recorder in his right hand. His name is Carlos Castaneda. He is an anthropologist, or at least he calls himself one, and he has a clear mission in mind: to document the use of hallucinogenic plants among the indigenous peoples of Mexico. An academic project, a thesis, but the desert has its own plans. One day, almost by chance, an acquaintance tells him about an old Yaqui Indian said to have deep knowledge of peyote. "Talk to him," the man says. "He knows more than anyone." Driven by curiosity, Castaneda sets out and eventually meets him. The man's name is Don Juan. He lives simply and quietly. His gaze is unsettling, piercing, as if he sees something others cannot. At first, he is polite but distant. He has no intention of speaking about his knowledge. Castaneda insists. He returns multiple times, trying to approach him with the respectful persistence of a determined researcher. Over time, something shifts. Don Juan begins to speak not of spirits, powers, or magic, but of herbs, techniques, and lived experiences. He presents himself simply as someone who knows certain plants. Nothing more. Castaneda is satisfied. He thinks he's on the right track for his thesis, but he doesn't yet realize he's stepping onto a path far different from the academic one. Because while he's taking notes, while he's recording, while he believes he is observing, he is the one being observed. And Don Juan, with patience and silent strategy, slowly introduces him to a world that escapes all ordinary logic. The world of the sorcerer, the nagual, the warrior shaman. Not through grand declarations, but with subtle gestures, meaningful silences, and a quiet way of overturning every certainty. The young anthropologist doesn't know it yet, but he is no longer there to study. He is there to be transformed. The 1970s opened with a wind of rebellion, searching, and transformation. It was the age of countercultural movements, inner revolutions, and spirituality seeking new forms. In this restless, feverish atmosphere, Carlos Castaneda exploded onto the scene as an unexpected phenomenon. In 1968, when he published The Teachings of Don Juan, a Yaqui Way of Knowledge, few imagined that this book, seemingly just an academic study, would ignite a spark beneath the collective consciousness of the Western world. But something unforeseen happened. The public didn't see a dry anthropological essay. They saw an initiatory journey, a bridge between worlds, a manual for perceptual freedom. The stories of his experiences with Don Juan, peyote, and inner transformation resonated deeply with a generation hungry for unconventional truths. The book sold millions of copies. It became a cult classic. Castaneda, almost against his will, became a reluctant prophet. He was quoted by Timothy Leary, the father of psychedelia, read by Allen Ginsberg, visionary poet of the Beat generation, followed by young hippies, disillusioned intellectuals, scientists in existential crisis, and artists searching for new muses. Everyone saw in him an elusive figure, an explorer of invisible territories. But when enchantment spreads too quickly, someone inevitably starts looking for cracks. While his books climbed international bestseller lists and captivated the imagination of millions, a different voice rose from the academic world. The voice of doubt. Who was Don Juan Matus really? Many anthropologists began digging. They searched for traces, confirmations, testimonies, but they found little to nothing. Timelines didn't add up. Places couldn't be verified. Names didn't exist in any archive. And most of all, no one, apart from Castaneda, had ever met Don Juan. The questions became sharper. Was it all a fabrication? A literary fiction disguised as an anthropological study? Castaneda, when questioned, did not cooperate. He avoided conferences, dodged requests, and preserved his aura of mystery. To those who pressed him, he would simply reply, "It doesn't matter if it's real. What matters is that it works." With that phrase, he cut the knot between historical truth and inner truth. For him, Don Juan wasn't necessarily a person, but a doorway, a force, a catalyst. The goal wasn't to describe the world of the Yaqui shamans the way an ethnographer might document an African ritual. The goal was to transform perception, to uproot the ordinary man from his mental habits, to make him derail, if only for a moment, from ordinary reality. And so, while academia questioned him, a new community embraced him, the seekers of inner worlds. For them, Don Juan exists. He exists every time someone reads about him and something stirs inside. He exists every time a reader pauses, looks at the world, and sees it with different eyes. Yet, the more his success grew, the more the mystery deepened. Castaneda avoided interviews. He didn't appear in public. He refused to be photographed. His image began to blend with that of his stories. He became an invisible author who spoke of invisible worlds. And who was Carlos Castaneda really? A visionary anthropologist, a modern-day sorcerer, or a skilled storyteller who managed to channel the spiritual tensions of his time? Perhaps the answer isn't to be found in documents, but in the very teachings of Don Juan. One of the fundamental principles of the warrior's path is inaccessibility. The warrior does not expose himself needlessly, does not let himself be grasped, does not offer explanations just to calm others' minds. Not out of fear nor arrogance, but because every time he justifies himself, he weakens. Every time he allows himself to be defined, he loses energy. A warrior is not available, Don Juan used to say. He must not become predictable. He must be impossible to find unless he wishes to be. In this light, Castaneda's behavior takes on another meaning. His absence from the public eye, his refusal to explain himself, his choice not to defend himself even in the face of doubt. These are not eccentricities or media strategies. They are acts of coherence with the path he had chosen, acts of power. For an ordinary man, credibility is everything. For a warrior, it is not. For a warrior, the only thing that matters is preserving energy, dissolving identity, and entering the unknown. And perhaps Castaneda never asked us to believe him. He merely showed us a door. It is up to us whether we choose to walk through it or remain standing outside looking in. The question remains suspended, and meanwhile the myth grows. Each of his new books, A Separate Reality, Journey to Ixtlan, The Fire from Within, became an event. Bookstores filled up. Readers searched for answers. Some even began to follow his teachings as a way of life. Carlos didn't offer dogmas, he offered experiences. And in a world tired of ideologies, that alone was enough to turn him into an icon. But every light also casts a shadow, and soon the same notoriety that raised him to the role of spiritual guide would attract suspicion, criticism, and questions not easily answered. Reality or fiction? The answer remains suspended, like everything that touches the border between the visible and the invisible. But for those willing to look, the threshold is already open. By the 1990s, Carlos Castaneda was no longer just an author. He had become a living symbol, but also an elusive and unsettling figure. He vanished from the public eye, refused interviews, changed homes, names, circles. Around him, a tight, nearly invisible group formed, composed mostly of women, disciples, warriors. They were called the Witches of the Nagual. They lived in seclusion, followed strict physical and mental disciplines, and devoted themselves to what Castaneda called the art of stalking, a demanding, sometimes ruthless discipline aimed at tearing the human being away from their ordinary identity. It was no longer the time of peyote visions. Now it was about tensegrity, recapitulation, and leaps into the unknown. The rituals became increasingly esoteric, almost military in nature, with a rigor that unsettled outside observers. The group lived like a secret order. Some called it a cult. Others spoke of a new form of shamanic asceticism. In 1998, Castaneda fell ill. A silent cancer consumed him. He died in Los Angeles on April 27th. But the news was kept hidden. For months, no funeral, no official statement, only a whisper drifting quietly like a night wind. Carlos is dead. And with him, something vanished, or perhaps dissolved into the subtle world from which he had come. But the mystery didn't end there. Some of his most devoted followers, including the charismatic Florinda Donner and Taisha Abelard, disappeared without a trace. They literally vanished. No bodies, no notes, no clues. Some say they took their own lives. Others swear they performed the final jump. For many, they followed the Nagual beyond the edge of the known. The legend lives on. To this day, dozens of groups still draw inspiration from his teachings. Some see him as a visionary, others a fraud, and some simply can't stop searching for Don Juan in the folds of their own consciousness. Because if it's true that the world is as we perceive it, then perhaps Castaneda never truly disappeared.
Castaneda's story invites us to look beyond what is visible, but each of us has our own way of seeing the world. I'd love to know what you think. Had you already heard of Carlos, or is this your first time discovering him? And if you already knew about him, what's your perspective? As for me, I was so fascinated that after the third book, I packed my bags and left for Mexico. If you feel like it, share your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed the video, leave a like and consider subscribing to the channel. It's a simple way to support this project and help me keep sharing stories like this one. See you soon!